You pull that box of convenient frozen burger patties from the back of your freezer for a quick backyard barbecue, trusting the bold front label shouting, flame-broiled classic beef. But flick the box over. The ingredient panel lists textured vegetable protein, hydrolyzed soy, caramel color, and beef flavoring right before the actual meat. Which of the popular freezer aisle brands you buy are feeding you a soy and water extender? There is nothing quite as convenient as the Backyard Cookout Rescue Plan, a box of frozen burger patties straight from the freezer to a hot grill in 10 minutes flat. We buy them in bulk for kids' birthdays, impromptu weekend dinners, and hot summer nights when turning on the stove feels like too much work. We trust the pictures of charcoal flames and juicy meat printed on the cardboard box. Yet, if you look past the rustic branding and inspect the fine print on the back panel, a quiet transformation has taken place in the modern meat industry. Pure ground beef has become an expensive commodity, leading corporate manufacturers to stretch their profit margins with textured soy flour, artificial smoke flavors, and water-binding starches. We're going to strip away the marketing gloss of 5 popular commercial frozen burger brands that rely on chemical extensions rather than livestock. Then, we are going to pivot directly to the 2 pure, single-ingredient brands that prove 100% beef is still the standard. Let's open the freezer. Walk down the frozen meat aisle of any major supermarket, and you are surrounded by visual assurances. You see weathered wooden backdrops, glowing charcoal grills, and massive, thick-cut patties glistening with morning dew or imaginary juices. But there is a silent legal wall built into the packaging terminology that most shoppers never notice. Under USDA food safety and labeling guidelines, there is a profound, federally regulated distinction between a product called ground beef and a product called a beef patty. If a package says ground beef, federal law dictates that it can contain only one single ingredient, chopped fresh or frozen beef with or without seasoning, and with no added water binders, extenders, or non-meat protein. But the moment the label changes to beef patty, the rules bend. Manufacturers are legally permitted to mix in up to 30% non-meat extenders and binders, including textured vegetable protein, TVP, soy flour, and various starches alongside added water to maintain targeted weight and volume. Why do some budget-priced frozen burgers shrink to half their size on the grill and release rivers of grey, bubbling water instead of rendering fat? It is not because the meat is simply fatty, it is because the factory injected water-binding vegetable proteins into the grind. When heat hits the patty, those trapped water molecules expand, break their chemical bonds, and escape, carrying away natural flavor and leaving you with a spongy, shriveled disc. The front box image of a raw steak is a psychological trap designed to make you bypass the back panel, where the real corporate math is written. Let's look at the first commercial brand caught in this net. Brand number 1 is a massive staple of warehouse, clubs, and bulk grocery stores. Packaged in plain white boxes with bold blue lettering. You have likely seen stacks of these patties filling grocery carts during the May through September grilling season. When you inspect the front, it proudly displays the words flame-seared beef patties. But when you turn the box around, the ingredient list reveals a long lineup of chemistry. The primary meat is backed by textured soy protein concentrate, caramel coloring to simulate natural char marks, disodium inosinate for savory enhancement, and hydrolyzed corn protein. When you place this patty on a hot cast iron skillet or an open wire grill, the physical reaction is immediate. Instead of forming a deep mahogany crust driven by the Maillard reaction between amino acids and natural sugars in real meat, the surface stutters. The added starches and caramel color create a mottled, grayish-brown skin, while moisture trapped by the soy protein bubbles out around the edges. It cooks fast, but the texture lacks the coarse, interlocking grain of tree muscle fiber. It yields a soft, almost uniform bite that feels processed because it is fundamentally assembled rather than ground. Brand number 2 takes a slightly different route, marketing itself as a tavern-style backyard classic. The branding features an illustrated cartoon chef holding a spatula, yet the back panel tells a story of cost mitigation. Here, beef is accompanied by beef heart meat, which is technically an edible byproduct rather than skeletal muscle alongside modified food starch, maltodextrin, and sodium phosphates. Sodium phosphates are industrial moisture retention agents designed to hold water weight inside the protein matrix, so the patty does not dry out in transit or during prolonged freezer storage. On the grill, brand 2 behaves similarly to the first, though the sodium phosphate creates a distinct rubbery elasticity under the teeth. If you let it cool for even 2 minutes on a plate, the fats and water separate sharply, leaving a translucent film across the bun. It is a masterclass in industrial engineering. Every chemical additive exists to make low-cost trimmings and water feel like a substantial piece of beef. Brand number 3 moves into the pre-season category, offering an onion and garlic-infused frozen patty, designed to save you prep time. The box features vibrant graphics of raw purple onions and cracked black peppercorns. But read the fine print under the seasoning declaration. Textured soy flour makes up nearly a quarter of the dry weight before rehydration. To mask the resulting vegetal taste of the soy filler, the manufacturer relies on heavy doses of autolyzed yeast extract and natural smoke flavor. When exposed to direct flame, the onion bits charred on the surface often turn acrid because they are dehydrated flakes mixed directly into the external layer of the patty. The structural integrity fails the spatula test. Flipping this burger too early results in the patty shearing apart along the internal lines where the soy binder meets the meat emulsion. It is convenience engineered to a price point, sacrificing structural physics for shelf stability. Brand number 4 is the ubiquitous blue and yellow value box found in discount supermarkets, promising 40 patties for a remarkably low price. This is the ultimate institutional workhorse of neighborhood block parties and youth sports concession stands. The ingredient deck is a dense paragraph: beef, water, soy protein isolate, dextrose, and corn syrup solids. The inclusion of simple sugars like dextrose and corn syrup solids serves a double purpose. It accelerates the browning process under high heat, compensating for the lack of natural muscle sugars in low-grade trimmings, and rounds out the salt profile. When you cook brand 4, the aroma is surprisingly aggressive, smelling more of savory bouillon than beef, a result of the concentrated yeast and hydrolyzed proteins. On the bun, it dissolves quickly without resistance, lacking the satisfying chew that defines a proper burger. It is food designed to be drowned in ketchup and mustard, where the condiments do the heavy lifting of providing flavor and moisture. Brand number 5 brings us to the edge of the negative countdown, a nationally distributed brand sold in nearly every major chain under a heritage farm name. The box shows a rustic red barn and green pastures, creating a powerful pastoral illusion. The ingredient panel lists beef, textured vegetable protein, modified cornstarch, and BHA and BHT added to help protect flavor. Those synthetic antioxidants are necessary because the high fat-to-lean ratios and processed extenders in these formulations turn rancid quickly in standard freezer conditions without chemical preservation. Placing brand 5 on a scorching hot grill produces a distinct, heavy plume of white smoke as the emulsified fats melt instantly and drip onto the burners, flaring up with chemical volatility. The cooked patty emerges tight, shrunken, and cupped upward at the edges, a classic sign of uneven moisture release and high binder concentration. We have walked through 5 examples of how modern food processing can stretch an animal's yield into an industrial product. Let's pause right here with a quick visual demonstration on a hot skillet. Watch what happens when we place a soy-extended frozen patty side by side with a 100% pure beef patty over medium-high heat. Within seconds, the extended patty begins to sweat, bubbling out a milky grey foam as the injected water and textured vegetable protein release their hold. It shrinks inward, pulling away from its original perimeter, leaving a pale, steam surface. Now look at the pure beef patty next to it. Within the same time frame, the edges contract slightly and tighten, the surface fats render clear and golden, and a deep, aromatic dark brown crust begins to lock onto the cast iron. That sensory difference is the physical proof of what happens when you remove the chemistry and leave only the animal. That brings us to the positive value pivot, the trust countdown. Here, we flip the emotional polarity from industrial compromise to complete culinary vindication by examining 2 frozen burger brands that refuse the shortcut of soy and water-binding chemistry. Brand number 1 on our positive list comes from a cooperative of Midwestern ranchers who utilize single-origin chuck and brisket grinds, flash frozen at peak freshness without a single secondary ingredient. Flip the box over, and the ingredient panel contains exactly one word: beef. There is no water, no textured protein, no sodium phosphate, and no caramel coloring. The ready-to-freezer supply chain relies on cryogenic liquid nitrogen freezing tunnels that drop the internal temperature of the formed patty below freezing in mere minutes, locking the cellular structure of the meat intact without forming large ice crystals that rupture muscle membranes. When you cook this pure beef patty, the performance on the grill is entirely different from the first 5 brands. The meat retains its diameter, shrinking minimally because no added water is boiling off. The rendered fat feeds the sear rather than drowning the pan, creating a robust, savory crust that smells deeply of iron, grass, and caramelized protein. The texture when bitten is coarse, granular, and satisfyingly toothsome, with individual strands of ground chuck separating cleanly on the palate. Brand number 2 on the trust list elevates the standard further by sourcing 100% grass-fed and grass-finished beef from pasture-raised herds, formed into thick patties and vacuum-sealed individually before boxing. The back panel is once again a single-word declaration: beef. Grass-fed beef carries a naturally higher concentration of omega-3 fatty acids and conjugated linoleic acid, which changes the thermal dynamics of cooking. Because grass-fed fat renders at a slightly lower temperature than grain-fed fat, these patties require careful attention on the grill medium-high heat zone rather than a raging inferno to prevent overcooking. When treated correctly, brand number 2 yields a clean, earthy flavor profile, with herbaceous undertones that reflect the forage of the cattle. There is no artificial smoke needed, no masking agents, and no chemical aftertaste. It proves that convenience does not require an unholy alliance with food science laboratories. You can have a fast meal straight from the frost without surrendering your standards for what you put on your plate. What you feed your family on a busy night is a quiet statement of values. Accepting soy extenders disguised as beef, or water-swollen protein matrices pumped with sodium phosphates, is an unnecessary concession to corporate cost-cutting disguised as modern efficiency. The frozen food aisle does not have to be a minefield of deception if you know the simple rule of engagement. Stop trusting the photography on the front of the box. Ignore the rustic barns, the roaring campfires, and the golden grill marks printed by graphic designers. Turn every box around and search for the single ingredient truth. Look for the explicit unadorned word beef or ground beef as the sole entry on the list, and eliminate the chemical binders from your kitchen rotation entirely. The next time you fire up the grill for a fast meal on a Tuesday evening, make sure you're actually grilling meat, not chemistry.